Hello, my friends across the fruited and rooted plain and beyond. It's time for the Gardening Simplified Show with Stacy Hervella, me, Rick Weist, and our engineer and producer, Adriana Robinson. Well, when it comes to getting from point A to point B, the garden path provides the balance of practicality and style that every plot needs, and it's a crucial feature in our landscape. Stacy, I'll never forget the paths in the gardens at Bouchard Gardens when I visited them, especially the Japanese garden, because it was so neat. There were paths that were single stone that you walk along, and at certain points, you reach a point where there are two stones side by side. And I asked about that, and they said, well, that's because the architect at this point wants you to stop, take a deep breath, and look at something specific. I thought that was really cool.
It's true. Paths can do so much for your experience through space, just like that. They kind of determine how you're going to walk through an area, not just the direction you're going to take, but the pace that you're going to take. Yeah. And, you know, something like stones like that, where they're set and you're taking larger steps, you're going to be taking shorter steps than if it was just, you know, a sidewalk in the middle of the city. And the path makes all the difference.
You bet. And how you make that path just up the road there from Bouchard Gardens. I remember going to Queen Elizabeth Park, and I was really struck by the pathways in the landscape. They were all grass, really well-edged grass paths. And I'd have to say, when it comes to material to use for a path, I think my first choice probably is grass, because many of these wonderful arboretums and places like Queen Elizabeth Park that you go to, the paths are made of grass. And Keukenhof this spring was another one like that. And the shadow of the trees on that beautiful green grass. I don't know. I love grass as a path.
Well, it is beautiful. It is a little bit high maintenance.
High maintenance.
But another thing that I've heard many people praise about grass paths is that it's quiet.
Yes,
you know, if you have a gravel path, and especially if you're in a public garden, it's crunch, 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 crunch the whole time. You can't enjoy yourself. You're crunching. Someone over here is crunching. It's Crunch City.
That's well put. Yeah. You know, crushed aggregate really does make a good path, but you're right. You got to be willing to live with the crunch underfoot.
And, you know, if you live in a snowy climate like we do, gravel can cause all sorts of problems. If you have to remove snow, then your gravel's in the bed and who knows where. And that's not exactly low maintenance either. Right. I mean, all paths are going to require some maintenance. But yeah, I mean, a really beautiful grass path is definitely hard to beat.
So be careful the path that you choose. Think about it, Stacy. I went to the dictionary, Merriam-Webster, and it said, the garden path, to lead someone down the garden path, means to deceive someone, to cause to go think or proceed wrongly. What a reputation.
That's not a fair definition at all. Leading someone down a garden path is a lovely thing.
I'm reading it right here.
I object.
As in, he believes the average consumer is being led down the garden path by promises in advertisement. So it has a little bit of a reputation. But the path is so important. I have also noticed this past year in trending and hardscaping, where we're using flagstone or patio stones or whatever it may be. It used to be you would pick a certain type and that was your path. Today, it's a mix of styles as well as sizes. Kind of fun what I'm seeing happening in the whole hardscaping area and creation of paths.
Well, you know, it's a lot like your house. Like if you have rugs through your house, sort of determining pathways through your rooms, you don't have the same rug every single place repeated all over. You have different rugs that offer some sort of cohesive look. Right. And I think it's perfectly acceptable to mix paths and bring them back in. And that can really create that, again, cohesive look where it's not all the same, but you can tell that you're in the same place.
Yeah, so a good concept is to interrupt the path. In other words, instead of a path that's same-o, leads someplace, doesn't have a lot of intrigue, along the path, interrupting it. And in some cases, when you get out of control, it includes a fountain or a plant or whatever it may be.
Yep.
But interrupting that path, I really think helps give character and interest to a path in the garden.
It's important because it's, yes, a path gets you from point A to point B, but there are many ways to design that. And if it's a straight line, that has value, but it also can be kind of dull. And if all your paths are straight lines, well, then you've just got like a super highway instead of a place where you are supposed to be slowing down and enjoying it. And again, stopping to pause. And that's what those interruptions in a path do.
You bet. I feel a limerick.
Oh, of course.
Coming on here regarding paths. Here you go. My pathways, you could say, are pathetic. Their appearance is less than aesthetic. I just stubbed my toe, they cause vertigo and are neither functional or cosmetic. Come on over if you want a trip on my path made of wood chip. Tree roots grow and revel, and my path is not very level. Just don't question my workmanship. My path that travels to nowhere is a threat to your physical welfare, but exists for one reason: no matter the season, it leads to my favorite lawn chair.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, thank you.
You really hit the
very
nail
much.
on the head with that one. I think so many people are like, okay, I have to design a path. And there is this concept in landscape design that professional landscape designers use that's wonderful. And as soon as I talk about this, it's going to pop in someone's mind. They've seen it before. User-directed design. Oh. And basically what that means is using the pathways that you have already created for yourself through your yard. You see this a lot in public parks, in campuses for sure. And, professionals can put in all the pathways that they want, but the way the people use the space is ultimately what's going to determine where those paths are. And so, you can approach your garden with this grand idea of, okay, I'm going to have paths here and here and here, and they're going to intersect like this. But ultimately, it's like you said in your limerick, where you go and the paths that you make for whatever reason, whether it's where you put your chairs, it's where a tree is, it's this, that, or the other, those are the paths that actually work and feel natural and organic.
Really well said. Those are paths with a purpose.
Yes.
Yeah,
I like
exactly. I like that. Now, some people will use concrete, and concrete doesn't have to be boring and gray. Today, there is stamped concrete. There's concrete with patterns in it. They put flakes in it. They put color in it. That's an option. You can buy rollout mats online, but I find them not to work real well, and they're very, very expensive. Recycled house brick is another option. And then, of course, when you talk about paths, Stacy, you also have to approach the issue of steppables, things like woolly thyme or other plants that you can step on.
Right. A big part of softening a path, especially, it doesn't have to be the whole path. Not all of those plants can take a whole lot of foot traffic. So whether or not you can use those and which ones you can use and in which quantity does depend on how much traffic your path actually gets.
Right.
And also from whom. If it's one thing if you are a pair of adult gardeners walking in your path on your paths, a couple of times a week. It's another if you have little kids or dogs. Adriana's nodding at the dogs. That's going to be a very different level of traffic and a very different level of care. And so that might not hold up. Those plants might not hold up as well. Whereas if it is someplace where you are supposed to slow down and you're not going to be tearing through there with your soccer cleats or whatever, then things like woolly thyme and different ground covers are a great choice.
Yeah, or the wonderful plants that you can line a path with. And I always think of lavender. I think lavender is just the ideal plant to line a path.
That is a great idea because of the fragrance. You know what's a nice idea for shade is Hakona Kloa, the Japanese forest grass.
Yes.
And that's that like low growing, very soft arching grass. And I've seen paths lined with it before and it's just perfection.
Yeah, I love it. Whatever your path, I recommend including some lighting, makes them magical at nighttime. And I love curved paths only because as you walk them, you really don't know what's around the next corner. Of course, a typical path would have mulch, and if you use mulch, I recommend shredded mulch, not the nuggets, because when we get rainstorms, they float away and ouch.
Yeah, and you don't want to get that stuck in your gardening flip-flops or garden clogs or whatever it is that's out there. Yeah, I agree. The shredded bark mulch, it nestles down very nice and makes a nice surface, and of course, it's enriching the soil underneath.
Yeah, interlocks. Plants on Trial is coming up next here on the Gardening Simplified show. Choose your path wisely. That's why we're here for you. Later in the show, we'll get to the mailbag also and answer your questions. That's all coming up on the Gardening Simplified show.
Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show. We're going to put a plant on trial. It's the time of the show where we talk about one of our favorite Proven Winners Color Choice shrubs, and you decide if it's going to earn a place in your garden or not. But I do want to go back quickly to something you said just before we took a break. And you said you love curved paths because you don't know what's around the bend.
Right.
But you know another great thing about curved paths?
What's that?
Is that if you have a smaller property, and my yard is about a quarter acre, so kind of a standard city lot, a curved path prolongs the amount of time it takes you to get anywhere in the garden. Of course, the shortest path is a straight line, and a curved line can really slow you down. And I think if you want people to, have the experience of being in your garden and being really surrounded by plants, it's perfectly acceptable to make your path loopy and going around and crossing back over itself, and providing those additional options for navigating the path and slowing people down so that there's more to enjoy.
I like that. Stop and smell the roses. It's almost like a speed bump.
Yeah, a little bit.
Forces you to slow down a little bit.
Yeah, there was a garden that I was lucky enough to see on Buffalo Garden Walk. And we talked about Buffalo Garden Walk before. One of the best free garden tours in the United States. Over 700 gardens available to see for free in Buffalo, New York, last full weekend in July. And this gentleman's garden, he can't put it on Garden Walk because you have to go through his amazing, beautiful Victorian house. And it's also a very narrow path, but it's a very small lot because it's an urban lot, so even smaller than that quarter acre. And his garden is just a path that's all planted with plants, and there's different combinations. So you slow down, and it's a long meandering path. And even though, the space is very, very short, and if it was a straight line, you'd be through it before you even knew it, this curved path, it really enlightened me to the value of just slowing down and making things not the most efficient way, because that's kind of what gardening is about.
That's a great point. I love it.
But, I was thinking, you said first thing in the show, a path gets you from point A to point B, but the plants along the path are what make the journey worthwhile. And there are so many options. We talked about a couple of different plants for edging paths. But I when I think about a path and I think about planting a path, my mind does go back to this gentleman's garden and the way that he positions certain plants to stop you to, because you'd be looking down because the path is also very narrow. And this is important too. If you have a really wide path and it's really level, you're just like la, 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 walking down the sidewalk. And if it's a little bit maybe treacherous, not dangerous, but you got to use some caution, you're going to be slowing down. And that was what this path was like. It was narrow and you didn't want to step on the plants. So you need, I think, especially at curves in your path, a showstopper of a plant.
Okay.
Something that while you're looking down at the path or at the other plants or at your feet even, whatever you're looking at, something that's going to make you go, whoa, what is that? And so today's plant on trial is Midnight Sun weigela.
Score.
Now, I think most people who are familiar with weigela are probably going, what? Weigela is like a 6 foot tall and wide shrub. How is that working on a path? Weigela are big. And Midnight Sun is a weigela that will totally change your opinion and experience of what a weigela is. And I think that's really exciting. So Midnight Sun weigela gets to be about 1 to 1.5 feet tall and wide. So it's kind of in the tuffet crowd. Everyone loves a good tuffet plant, right? So kind of round, small, cute. So it is that. And its foliage, weigela are generally not thought of as foliage plants, right? They're thought of as flowering plants. Not that there's anything wrong with their foliage. It's, fine. It's not ugly, but it's not like people grow weigela mostly for their flowers. Well, Midnight Sun, the foliage has like a really deep, kind of corrugated type texture, and the foliage is much thicker as well. So it's not just like
hard to describe.
It is hard to describe.
But it's stunning when you see it. I was going to say Little Miss Muffet would really approve of that tuffet.
Indeed. Now, if you do want to see pictures, of course, they're going to be on our website, gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, or you can visit our Instagram page. We're always going to put the plant on trial there to see some pictures. So wherever you happen to be, whatever's more convenient. But I will paint a picture here of kind of what it looks like, because again, we're turning the whole notion of weigela on its ear, I think, with Midnight Sun. So in spring, it emerges. The foliage is green, everything you'd expect. Weigela tend to be like a late spring, early summer bloomer. So come late spring, it's going to bloom with some dark pink flowers, and you'll be perfectly happy with it. But it's what happens after that. And people don't tend to think of weigela as more of these late season plants. It's like late spring only. So as the season goes on and as we get into July, the foliage, the new growth starts to emerge in these colors of like yellow and red. And as that foliage matures, it matures to a purple color. So what you end up with a little later in the season, after there's no more flowers, is sort of these layers of foliage. So you have the dark green lowest, and then purple, and then the new growth is again emerging in these kind of yellow tones. And so all of those colors at once are on the plant. And this is going on, and that's another great thing about using this in paths, is that no matter when you're walking down that path, you're having this dynamic experience where things are really changing. It's not just, well, there's the weigela. It looks the same as it did 3 weeks ago. Every single day, it's looking a little bit different. Now, here we are. It's late October, and at this point in the season, Midnight Sun weigela turns the most incredible shade of red. I mean, it's wild. I've been observing this plant for probably 3 years now in our trial gardens here, and I am amazed every fall. Weigela is not a full color plant.
Stacy, Mr. Weigel would be very proud of this plant, right?
Yes, he would.
Yeah.
This is one that you would definitely be glad the genus was named after you, as in Weigel.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, it just turns this amazing red. And like, there's no other weigela really that's a fall color plant. Now, we've had the Sonic Bloom series of weigela for several years in the line of Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs. It's a reblooming weigela. Blooms in late spring along with the rest, takes a little break, and then continues to bloom summer and fall. But even though they'll have flowers later in the season, they don't have this just amazing foliage show that Midnight Sun does. And it's so different than anything else you see in weigela.
That's just fantastic. Okay, Stacy, tell us, who developed this fabulous plant?
Well, and it's a great question because it is so different. I was talking to our plant breeders about it because I'm like, this is so different than any other weigela. So Midnight Sun weigela comes to us from the Netherlands, of course, and the breeder is a gentleman named Bert Verhoef. You speak Dutch, not me.
Verhoef.
Verhoef, okay. Bert Verhoef, and he owns a nursery in Boskoop, of course, where all of the nurseries in the Netherlands are. And he is also the breeder of a plant, a weigela, in the Proven Winners line that a lot of people will be familiar with, and that is My Monet.
Yay!
So one that's been around for a long time. He's obviously very passionate about weigela. He also developed My Monet Purple Effect, and so you can tell that he just kind of has this idea, this vision for weigela, and how he ended up coming out with Midnight Sun weigela, I have no idea, because it really is so different than anything else. But I think his passion for the genus really shows in Midnight Sun in a way that, you don't necessarily see in just a weigela that's like, yeah, sure, it has great flowers, but weigela are supposed to do this. When you have someone who's just taken a totally new approach and said, what if weigela was a foliage plant? What if weigela could be planted like a perennial instead of a giant shrub that, you have to devote a lot of space to?
Yeah. And it's one of those, what is that? Plants. You get that if you're in a garden center or you have something planted in front of your house. It's one of those that causes people to stop. What is that?
Yeah, and they go, that's a weigela?
Wow.
Because no one's used to weigela. Right. This would be a great one. If you are a gardener and you have snooty gardening friends who you want to stump, this is a good one to get into the garden and take them to it in fall and say, what is this? I guarantee you when it's not in flower, if they aren't familiar with the plant, they will be stumped.
I think sometime I'll do a limerick on snooty garden friends.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
I'm eager
I'll
to
work on it.
I hope it's not about me, though.
No. Not at all.
So, like most weigela, it is going to be a full sun plant. Because it's not as much about the flowers, you could probably get away with some shade, especially towards the cooler or the warmer parts of its range. However, I think you're definitely going to see the best color on the foliage if it's getting a good 4 to 6 hours, even more hours of sun every day. That's an important fact, just because you want the best in it. Not that the plant won't live, but because you want it to perform like you you see in the pictures, like you hear us describing here on the Gardening Simplified show. So it is hardy USDA zones 4 through 8. I'm going to put all of the information on the Gardening Simplified on-air website. You can find everything there. Or of course, you can always Google Midnight Sun weigela. You'll find all sorts of internet sites and information about it. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we've got the mailbag bursting at the seams with gardening questions, so please stay tuned. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show. We have some great questions this week. I think we should get right into it. But before we do, if you do have a question you want to send to us, help, HELP, at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, or just go to gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, fill out the contact form, and you will reach us as these people did. What do we got in the mailbag?
Wendy writes, last year I noticed lots of bumblebees on the vermilion air. That's a Kufia?
Kufia, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I got carried away this year, have 5 plants with scads of bumbles on them. Looking closely, I don't see that they can access the nectar. So I'm feeling guilty now that the bumbles are working so hard for no reward. We have other lantana, Russian sage, echinacea, butterfly bushes, which bumbles are on, but not as many as on the vermilion airs. Do I not grow them? I have Hummer feeders, so Hummers don't need the plants. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. Thanks. Hope you can assuage my guilt.
Yeah, so I thought this was an interesting question, Wendy. And partly because I also grow vermilion air. It's one of my absolute must-have annuals because of hummingbirds and bumblebees. And even though I also feed the hummingbirds with feeders, I find they love the vermilion air. And one of the things I love about the vermilion air is I always plant it in containers on either side of my back door. So if we are walking down to the basement to get the laundry or whatever, you take a little pause on that landing and you're almost sure to see a hummingbird from like 2 feet away.
Wow, awesome.
And it's awesome. So that's one of the things I love about them. And I do, again, notice a lot of bumblebees on mine as well. And it never did occur to me that, yeah, they're, their bumbly little buns can't fit into those Kufia flowers. So I looked it up and, again, they've never seemed deterred. They seem perfectly happy to, go all over the plant, exploring all the flowers. So I looked it up and I found a couple of interesting things. I think you should absolutely continue to grow them. I think that I'm going to tell you these 2 facts, but I think that the bottom line is, the insects know what they're doing,
sure,
right? And if they are working really hard for no reward, well, maybe they're just bored and they're just tired of things being a little too easy and they just are exploring and playing around. And if they get tired out, well, they'll move on to one of your other flowers where they can get something. But I do think that they are absolutely getting pollen and nectar, and that's for 2 reasons. One, and this is something I learned researching Wendy's question, there are both short-tongued and long-tongued bumblebees.
I didn't know that.
Yes, I didn't know that either. So we're going to put links for all of this so you don't have to take our word for it. You can find that we are backed up by legitimate organizations on this. Short and long-tongued bumblebees. And so short-tongued bumblebees will obviously only feed on plants that their tongues can reach the pollen and nectar. And long-tongued can feed on a much wider variety of plants, and their tongues can, actually access things down in that skinny tube. So if you're not familiar with Kufia, beautiful plant, narrow orange and white flowers. But yeah, they are, some people call it a cigar plant because that's sort of the shape of the flowers. So almost certainly, even if you can't necessarily tell the difference between the different bumblebees in your yard, the ones that are visiting the Kufia are most likely long-tongued bumblebees and can get down there. And the other thing is that bumblebees, and I think we've even talked about this on the show, use buzz pollination.
Yeah, they're trying to get buzzed.
Yeah, so they are able to, when they go onto a flower, they're able to kind of shake it and vibrate it so that the pollen comes loose and sticks to them. And then they take the pollen back to their nest. It's rich in protein. And while they are gathering pollen to sustain their colony and they're mostly solitary bees, but to sustain their young, that pollen's going to get on other flowers and they'll end up pollinating it. So they're also able, through their physical strength, to vibrate the pollen out of the flower. So I think the bumblebees are fine. By all means, continue to grow vermilion air and all the rest of things. And this is why it's so important to have a diversity of plants in the garden, because you never know what you're going to find out. And if you have both short and long-tongued bumblebees, which you almost certainly do, you've got stuff for the short tongues, you got stuff for the long tongues, and everyone is happy. So grow what you like, grow what they like, and everyone wins.
You talk about about the diversity, I would add to it for Wendy the proven winners Rockin' series of fuchsias. So
salvia?
Salvia,
Yeah.
Rockin' fuchsia, deep purple, Playin' the blues, blue suede shoes. Talk about bumblers.
Yeah, Rockin' Deep Purple is one of my other favorites because I love all those bright, vivid colors.
So add those. All right, Trang writes to us, hello, I have a question about lawn clippings on lawns treated with crabgrass prevention. Typically, I love using my lawn clippings in the composter as a mulch in flower beds or raised beds. However, I have a huge problem with crabgrass. I'm considering use of crabgrass prevention. I'm worried about the persistent herbicide ultimately stunting the growth of his plants. So Trang kind of struggling with crabgrass and clipping.
Yes. So, Trang, I appreciate you asking this question because it is a situation I am also dealing with after years of just saying, I've often joke that if I wrote a blues song, it would be, if it wasn't for crabgrass, I wouldn't have no grass at all, because that would pretty much be true, except for ornamental grasses. I have let crabgrass grow in my garden as well because I'm just like, I don't want to use herbicides, whatever. But this year it was awful. Oh my gosh, the crabgrass in my yard was terrible, and it escapes the lawnmower, and there's seed everywhere. My neighbors are going to hate me. So I am also considering using a crabgrass pre-emergent this year. And the really nice thing, or the thing that gives me confidence about doing it, is that most, not all, but most crabgrass pre-emergents are formulated just for crabgrass. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to worry about them impacting other plants. One of the reasons that I am sometimes hesitant to use pre-emergents is because I want those self-sowers. I like milkweed self-sowing in my garden. I like the arugula self-sowing in my garden so that I have that natural look of different things coming up. So I don't want to just put down a pre-emergent that's going to prevent everything from germinating, but I do want to control this crabgrass. So sure. Now I did some research just online. Now a number of crabgrass pre-emergents will also prevent other lawn weeds and other grasses from emerging. But there are some that are formulated just for crabgrass. So I think if you do your research and pick one that is just for crabgrass, you don't have to worry about that harming other things in your bed, because all it is formulated to do is to prevent those crabgrass seeds from germinating.
So my recommendation, Trang, would be the first thing you could do, and it's simple, raise the deck on your lawnmower. You raise the deck, that helps with crabgrass control. That's one thing. The other thing, when you apply the pre-emergent, water it into the soil. That's where it's meant to be, to keep that seed from germinating. So it's not up in the foliage profile where he's using these clippings. There are also crabgrass controls for seeding, meant to be used if you're seeding. In other words, they have a far shorter residual. That's something that you can take a look at also, and they're available on the market.
Right. So crabgrass pre-emergent treatment is in early spring, usually when the forsythia is blooming here in Michigan, or wherever you are, in fact. So you have plenty of time this winter to do your research, find the right treatment for you, and hopefully get those darn crabgrasses out of your beds.
Yeah, Trang, when wherever you live, when the soil temperatures get to 55 to 60 degrees, that's when that crabgrass seed is going to germinate. So be there and get a little lawn and order in your landscape there. Sherry writes to us, Blue Muffin viburnum has had its leaves eaten by bugs. All the leaves. Will the shrub live? Blue Muffin viburnum.
Yeah,
love that plant.
Great plant. We've had it for years. Still one of our most popular plants. It is a native, North American native viburnum. Viburnum dentatum, or also known as arrowwood viburnum. And as such, I haven't seen a picture of Sherry's plant, but I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that it was the dreaded viburnum leaf beetle. Oh man, these things are a pest. They are an invasive from Asia, and as such, they don't bother the Asian species of viburnum. So if you have Korean spice viburnum, other viburnums that are not native to America, those will be left untouched. But your native American viburnums, the viburnum leaf beetles, love them, and they have a very distinctive damage. They make holes, but they look like a grain of rice.
Okay.
They're kind of like an oblong. They're not the size of a grain of rice. They're bigger, but they have that same kind of shape. And they're all over the plant. So you just have these weird kind of rice-shaped windows all over the leaves. And if you're looking carefully, particularly at the underside of the leaves, you see their ugly little larvae, which even though they're a beetle, most larvae overwinter in the ground or mature in the ground like grubs. But these beetle larvae, no, they like to go on your viburnum and eat the leaves, and they really do a number. So they're easy to identify. Now, the easiest non-toxic way to control viburnum leaf beetle is, once its foliage drops, is look for their egg laying sites. So they have this weird thing where they chew little holes in your viburnum stem, lay an egg in it, and then they refill it with like a mix of their spit and wood chips, or like, sorry, Adriana's made such a face just then. And I can't blame you. But they're they're small, but they're very distinctive and easy to see. So the easiest way to manage them is to inspect your plant for these egg laying sites and trim them off. Now that might mean in some cases that you are trimming your viburnum back, but I think that's okay. And I think it's worth it to just get rid of the infestation. And because if you don't do it, they're just going to keep coming and coming and coming. But I did find a great resource for viburnum leaf beetle that we're going to put on our website, and that will also show you a picture of what those egg laying sites look like, so you can find them and cut them out.
You've made us all bug wiser. Cheers.
Cheers. With that, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, we've got branching news, so please stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. It's time for branching news. Stacy, I'm going to lead branching news this week by telling you that I made an Amazon delivery driver cry.
Oh my goodness. Because of the beauty of your garden?
You know, she walked up with the package to the front steps, and I have Truffula pink gomphrena there, and verbena, and Miss Molly butterfly bush.
Ooh.
And the cannas, and the monarch butterflies were everywhere. It was a warm, sunny afternoon, and she sat the package down and was crying. And she said she had not seen that many monarch butterflies since her dad passed away 5 years ago.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So it was, one of those really cool moments, because, again, when the monarchs are all over the place and just kind of fluttering around, it's magical.
It is magical. And, it's magical that when we plant things, and we plant them for ourselves or the hummingbirds, but, ultimately for ourselves, we don't really realize how they're going to impact other people. Yeah. And, you might not hear, people might have that response and you'll never hear it, but you know that whatever those decisions are making an impact on others, and usually, hopefully, a positive impact.
Yeah. So we had an Amazon Prime moment together. All right, the town of Banff. Have you been to Banff?
I have not been to British Columbia, but okay. I should go.
Yeah, that is incredible. Just west of Calgary. And then, of course, just up the road is Lake Louise. I mean, I sat down at the edge of Lake Louise, and it takes your breath away. I mean, it's just unreal. So you got to go sometime. Anyhow, in Banff, they're renewing the call for homeowners to replace their fruit trees with something less appealing to wildlife after a grizzly bear known locally as the Boss had to be hazed from residents' backyards with a big grizzly buff charging residents in the charging residents in the process. So this huge adult grizzly bear is feeding on crab apples in backyards, causing a ruckus. He's known as the Boss, weighs 650 pounds, the most dominant grizzly bear in and around Banff National Park. He even once brushed off being struck by a train.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, Rick, don't get off track here and go crazy with puns. This bear had great training. Anyhow, yeah, so he's known as bear number 122.
Okay, or the Boss, whichever you prefer.
Or the Boss. And he is buff and bluff, so there you go.
Well, I've heard, this is the first I've heard of that, and that would be a shame because crab apples are so wonderful. But I have heard of moose. I've never heard of a bear, but I have heard of moose getting drunk on fermented apples and crab apples. Yeah. And I guess it's not going to happen with the bear because they're going to be hibernating when they actually ferment. But still, a lot of risk here, I guess.
It's a sight to see. They usually lose their car keys, but they sleep it off in the woods, and everything's good. The White House, they have, some people may not know this, at the White House, they have fall garden tours. That's really cool. Usually in mid-October. The reason it comes up in branching news is because the government announced that if there was a government shutdown, the garden tours would also be taken away. So really interesting. Visitors have the opportunity to see the Rose Garden near the West Wing, the Jacqueline Kennedy Garden near the East Wing, the Kitchen Garden, that was established in 2009. So in the event that the federal government is shut down, then the fall garden tours go away also. I remember visiting the White House once. I visited the White House, and they have those pools, those fountains, both on the north and the south lawn. And I exited out the north lawn doors, and that pool is usually circled by red tulips and muscari in spring, and then red geraniums and Dusty Miller in summer, and then chrysanthemums in the fall. This particular year, they used red salvia.
Oh.
And I noticed a few of the salvias were past their prime, and so I veered off the path to go deadhead them.
Yeah, did you create a national security incident?
You don't do that. My intentions were good, but it's not good when you hear on the walkie-talkie, we got a situation here on the north lawn. We have a break, that kind of thing. So don't do that.
Well, I was wondering, with the government mentioning the government shutdown, I wonder if the gardeners are considered essential workers. Because,
good question.
A White House that's all surrounded by weeds is not going to make anyone that's not good for national morale.
You got it.
I think they're essential, but I don't make these decisions.
And I think deadheading's essential too.
You're right.
Which I tried
they
to
would have stopped flowering otherwise.
But they weren't going to listen to me.
Please exit the building.
Okay. From the pumpkin patch, decades of experience, dedicated research keep Illinois on top when it comes to pumpkin production. Did you know that?
No.
Illinois harvests more pumpkins than its closest competitor, Indiana. So the scorecard says Illinois, Indiana, California, Texas, and Michigan are the big top 5 when it comes to pumpkins.
I like it.
Yeah. So like they say, go big or gourd home. Yeah. Okay. The average American whips out their phone to take a photo 6 times each day. A survey of 2,000 U.S. adults revealed that camera rolls are flooded with group photos of friends, family, as well as photos of selfies, pet pics, and scenery. So our landscape and our nature all around us, 43%, top the list of frequent photos. So 6 pictures a day.
It depends on the day. Also, my phone is definitely mostly full of pictures of my garden.
Yeah.
And not like my garden, but like plants, that are looking good. Because my garden as a whole doesn't look good. The individual plants look good.
Yeah, with me, it's plants and Lake Michigan sunsets and
yeah.
storms and that type of thing. But 6 times a day, taking a picture, that seems kind of low to me, actually. I would think people take more than 6
Depends on the
pictures a
day. Depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, I guess so. You're using your cell phone too much when you're having a conversation with someone and you say LOL instead of just laughing out loud. Then you're using your cell phone.
To me, it's when you see a picture like on a piece of paper and you use your fingers to try to enlarge it. That's my cue.
That is good. That is good. Maybe sometime we'll have to branch off down that road and talk about that. What's all the buzz about? A Southwest Florida sheriff's office had quite the discovery last week when deputies found that a cabinet left near the building had become home to thousands of bees. The Charlotte County Sheriff's Office said the cabinet was set out near the evidence lot.
Oof.
The evidence cabinet. Ooh. So it could be disposed of. However, the cabinet became home to more than 8,000 bees in less than a week.
Oh my gosh.
8,000 bees.
Wow.
Deputies were able to carefully remove the hive and transport the insects to their new home near the Warden Farms in Shell Creek Grove. The sheriff's office even took it a step further and assured their readers on Facebook that the relocated bees are where they are meant to be and had a great house swarming party.
I'll bet they did.
When something like this happens, you resort to plan B, I guess, right? Now, also in branching news, we got to continue to remind people of this fact. We have an Instagram account.
Yes, we do.
And we'd love to have you continue, of course, sending us pictures and your questions, but also visiting our Instagram account, because one of the things I love about this account, Stacy, is that when we do plants on trial, many times you will post that plant on Instagram, and you'll be able to see it in its full glory.
Yeah, and all the information, because, sometimes I just get too carried away talking about the plant on trial, and I don't get into the stuff like, it's this hardy, it's this size, sometimes I forget those basic details. So Instagram is a great place to find that, and lots of other gardening inspiration as well.
A picture's worth 1,000 words. Thank you very much for tuning in the Gardening Simplified show. We want to invite you to go to our website, gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. Send us pictures, send us your questions. And Stacy, always a privilege and pleasure to do the show with you.
Likewise, Rick, and to Adriana as well, and to all of you as well. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you have a wonderful week ahead.